Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight, we're joined by cardiac surgeon. I think you probably know him. I don't even need to introduce him. Host of the Dr. Oz Show, and now a candidate for United States Senate in the great state of Pennsylvania, Dr. Mehmet Oz. Dr. Oz, I mean, I didn't even need to introduce you. You're a household name. I feel like so many of us have either grown up with you or you've been a part of our lives for so long on TV that we all feel like we know you and we feel so comfortable with you. But now you're running for United States Senate. I have to start with that because that's a big decision. And as someone who, as I just said, we all kind of feel like we know, people are comfortable with, you could have just sailed off into the sunset and had it easy. Why'd you decide to do this?
You know, I asked your father-in-law that question about 5-6 years ago. He was running in 2016. You know firsthand what our family's gone through.
Yeah.
You know, I feel very blessed to be in America, especially because my parents were immigrants here. They were welcomed. My dad had been recruited to be a heart surgeon. We were short on doctors at the time. And what I really love the most about America is the country welcomed us. In fact, it welcomes immigrants to come the right way and allows us to achieve dreams ever possible otherwise. But I began to think over the last few years, I don't know if you felt this as well, that the country was in crisis. We were being challenged by issues that we were not having to face years ago. And those issues were becoming larger and larger, obscuring our view, depressing people, causing anxiety. And at a certain point, when you've done all the things you think you need to do in your day job, you start realizing that to truly serve, you actually might have to leave the comfort, the trappings of your normal, comfortable life. That for me involved being a heart surgeon, and you know, the operating room is a very safe place for a surgeon. But the reality is it becomes a bit of an issue when you're trying to be a politician and take care of patients in the operating room, and same for hosting a TV show. So I did what unfortunately you have to do to run, which is to give up everything. I took my name off the awning of the show, which you never do, as you know, in entertainment. You wouldn't normally do that because once you get your name on the awning, it's hard to get it back.
Right.
I had several years of contracts, gave it up, closed the magazine, closed all the other things I was doing. In fact, my daughter Daphne, who you know, is going to start hosting a new show in place of mine starting on Monday called The Good Dish, where three women who are chefs dish on stuff that matters, talking, but they also make dishes. And that was all done pretty quickly because I had not planned on entering the race this rapidly. But when the opportunity presented itself, I thought, if I'm ever going to make a difference, if I'm ever going to go and fight for the values that I think are critical to the success of this country long term, if I'm going to hand the baton that I was given from my parents, a shining, beautiful baton to my kids and their kids, then I've got to do it now.
Wow. Well, look, it's a courageous decision, and you basically done the impossible, I feel like, up until now, which is you've stayed sort of apolitical. You have people probably who've watched you for years would not know whether you were a Republican or a Democrat. And these days, Dr. Oz, that is incredibly hard to achieve. So the fact that you were willing to kind of give up all of that, and I mean, you just talked about so much that you had to give up personally, your show, magazine, like all of the things that you've worked so hard to achieve, to run for an office where, I mean, you said it, we know no better than anyone in our family. They will go after you. They will go after your family. They will do anything and everything to you because you are running as a Republican. Now, were you running as a Democrat, that would be a totally different story. But any regrets so far? Has anything surprised you? Has anyone surprised you, people that maybe you considered friends now that you have said you're running as a Republican? Because they don't make it easy.
Every day is a surprise. But I'll tell you, it has been exhilarating. It is like drinking from a fire hose. So it lets you fast and you have to sort of get adjusted. That stated, the biggest surprise of all, our friends and family calling and saying condolences, jokingly, but then saying thank you. Wow. I appreciate that you decided to make the move. I know you're doing it for the right motivation. We know it's going to be difficult, but we all need to do it. And more patriotic Americans are sitting back, and they may not all drop their day job and run for political office. Many are doing it by getting involved financially or actually just talking openly about what they truly feel. You mentioned the fact that I hid who I was pretty effectively. It began to slip out more and more in the last few years because I just was reaching a boiling point in my own psyche. I couldn't be quiet about COVID because I thought we were being mismanaged. And the mismanagement was so grotesque, that and people losing their lives, that I had to speak up. But to not be able to articulate that and allow people to say it without trying to cancel you drove me crazy. 2 years ago, we were saying, you got to keep the schools open. I mean, there's data is not there to defend closing schools. In fact, quite the opposite. There's pretty good evidence we can keep schools open. Other countries are doing it. Why couldn't we? Cancel. Or I think we should have therapeutics besides just vaccine. And I like the vaccine. I mean, President Trump's push for warp speed action on vaccines gave the world a solution, unbelievably effective. And I got a vaccine, and I've been a strong advocate for vaccines. But vaccination is a preventive strategy. Doctors all know we try to prevent disease, but Lara, you have to have a treatment as well. If I give you a cholesterol medication to prevent a heart attack, but you happen to still have a heart attack, I got to treat the heart attack. Right. There was no contingency plan with the Biden administration. So without getting political about it, I felt that we're letting America down. We were coming to a place where we knew we had treatments, and we weren't allowing those treatments to be studied or offered to Americans. I'll use pills as the example. And we don't have to talk about hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. There are lots of pills that we just haven't been able to figure out, which is our fault, because by now we should know for sure if they work or not. We don't. But let's just take pills that are FDA approved. One made by Merck that was a several-year-old drug, existed before the pandemic started. They enrolled 2 people a day, Lara, 2. What happened? Why wasn't that Operation Warp Speed? That was Operation Turtle Speed. And nothing happened. And now we don't have the pills in the pharmacies, even though it's approved. The Pfizer drug, 90% reduction of symptoms of that they require hospitalization or maybe even death if you take this pill in a timely fashion if you're diagnosed. Where is it? I've been looking everywhere. I can't even get antibody cocktails for my patients. So these are all examples of how we mismanaged the pandemic. And part of the reason, because all humans are, error prone and mistakes happen. But part of the reason was we didn't allow doctors to talk. They were shut down, canceled, silenced, othered, because we had public health officials who were not willing to tolerate the discussion. And there was an organized effort with media to shut down these doctors. No Nobel laureates were getting canceled. And these are the kinds of issues that prompted me to finally say enough. If it's happening in healthcare, and I know it's happening in COVID, then it's probably happening in the economy, and it is. And it's probably happening in our school system, and it is. And law and order, and it is. And the border, and it is. And I can go on and on and on.
Yeah, well, you bring up so many things that I think so many of us have had questions about. I personally have had friends of mine who have gotten COVID, wanted to use therapeutics because they know of other people. I mean, my father-in-law was one that when he actually had COVID and was in the hospital at Walter Reed, talked about the fact that therapeutics allowed him to get better more quickly. Why isn't that something, Dr. Oz, though, that this administration, the Biden administration, seems to have prioritized at all? I get it. They want to control a lot of what Americans do by telling us all that we need to be vaccinated. And you just said it, Operation Warp Speed under my father-in-law's administration, the Trump administration, truly one of the great accomplishments, I think, of our time. No other president, let's be honest, would ever have been able to fast forward things in the fashion that my father-in-law did and rapidly produce a vaccine that certainly has saved lives. We cannot disagree with that in any way. But instead of saying, well, here are the other options, here are therapeutics available, this administration has solely focused on getting people vaccinated. Friends of mine have tried to get things like Regeneron. They cannot find them anywhere. What is the story with that? Why was like hydroxychloroquine shut down so early? Ivermectin, people made fun of it. These are things that have successfully treated people. Am I wrong on that?
These medications have been used in other countries. People swear by them, but we never got the trials done because they got shut down. I tried to fund one of these trials early. I gave $250,000 to Columbia University, where I'm on the faculty, and the governor of the state of New York, Andrew Cuomo, shut down the clinical trial. Said, I don't want trials. And then he went on and said doctors are not allowed to prescribe the pill that's FDA approved. That's never happened before in American history. That's not.
By the way, Dr. Oz, not to interrupt you, I took hydroxychloroquine when I visited South America like 20 years ago as a preventative for malaria. So why would it be so immediately shut down? I think that was the issue so many people had. It wasn't even given a chance.
Because your father-in-law supported it.
Yeah,
I was talking about it because I'd heard about this from a French doctor who's very well respected, Didier Raoult, and I was using it in Marseille, and I thought, well, this might be beneficial because a lot of doctors were without any tools, and you march into war with the tools you have.
Right.
And I began talking about it, but as soon as politics got into it, and when you mix politics and medicine, you get politics.
Terrible, yeah.
So we all of a sudden shut down an idea that might have been effective. But can I take a step back? There was a op-ed, every single day there's an op-ed about me in the New York Times, and never positive. But this one,
we know the feeling.
Yes, this one was an interesting op-ed. It was published on Sunday, and the author said, what makes Oz most dangerous is that he believes in the individuality of people, that he believes people should be empowered to make their own decisions. And in a time when we have racial racism, structural racism, in a time of global warming and in a time of COVID, that is a dangerous thing to say. And I thought to myself that actually explains why there's so much hatred for what I represent, because my whole career has been about empowering people. I do it on the show as a doctor. I always thought that you're not chattel. Let me give you information. You make the best decision for yourself. It's a classically conservative Republican idea. Nothing radical about it, but that idea is no longer acceptable to Americans. Americans that in the elite anyway believe that you don't have the ability and therefore should not be given the responsibility. And you know what? Any government that usurps that power and becomes so strong that it takes care of you is also just as strong as it needs to be to take away all that and make you a serf. And that's the biggest fear. And when you look at I was in Miami recently, and I was talking with Cubans who some of whom had actually fled from Castro, and they told me something I did not realize, that Castro was funded by white elites on the island, that he was given money by people who should have known better because they thought he was better than the dictator who had been there or the strongman who'd been there before. And I don't want the same thing happening in America, where we have people who should know better funding Marxist organizations that change the way children see our history, that prevent us from having discourse, which is the fundamental need of a democratic society. And those are the kinds of challenges that I'm faced now as I campaign for senator in Pennsylvania. And I'll tell you, there's a grassroots tsunami of frustration expressed by the Pennsylvanians I talk to, because they know we're better than this. All they want to do is get the government out of our way, and they can probably fix the problem.
Well, it's the most American thing to have individual freedom to decide what you want to do, whether it's your livelihood, who you want to marry, how you want to make a decision medically, etc. That is solely up to an individual, and that is something that I think is fundamental to who we are as Americans. So nice to see somebody speaking up about that, Dr. Oz. I mean, there have been many of us who have brought these things up, but someone, with your name recognition, getting into a race like this, I think it's very interesting, and I'm really excited to see what's going to happen. I do want to ask a little bit about you, because I said it kind of leading into the show. We've all known you, or we feel like we know you. I'm sure everybody comes up to you when they see you and they're like, oh, I feel like I know you so well. But you became a household name, but you were a surgeon before that, a doctor before you kind of showed up on our TV screens. You just talked about the fact that you are a first generation American. So I assume more so than some people who, have been generation after generation living here, you probably appreciate this country very much. And I understand many of the reasons that you want to run for Senate, but what did you do? What were you like before you were on our TV screens? I'm pretty sure I read that you were a football player, water polo, an athlete. I love it. What is something people don't know about you?
Laura, my upbringing was a pretty typical immigrant kid upbringing, because my father just focused on a few simple things. He wanted me to get into a good college, to study hard. He wanted me to realize that it wasn't about smarts. It was about hard work that would get me to where I needed to be. In fact, my father and mother never told me I was smart. They told me if I did well, that I must have worked hard. And if I didn't do well, that I must not have worked hard. It's pretty binary. And in fact, it turns out modern child psychology would enforce what they're saying. Because if you're good at math and then you do poorly on a math test, what does that mean, Lara? It means you're not good at math. You can't change that. So that was the mindset that I took through my grade school. I was always in a leadership role. I was captain of my teams in high school. I won the captain's award in college. I did play football and water polo at Harvard. I was captain of my class in med school, captain of the student body afterwards. I mean, I always liked being able to get out in front of issues and try to figure out how we as a group could do better. And too often it was hindered by weak leadership. So I think those things matter. But of all the things that I've done, the thing I'm most proud of, and the thing that I did it in the house that I'm living in now, is I married my wife 36 years ago. Wow. And marrying her was the coup of because she had such a different worldview than me and had come from such a different place. And she's from just from outside Philadelphia, and I was from the southern part. But it allowed us to form a bond that has changed my life. She had a much bigger vision for me than I did. And you remember remember the Visine commercials?
Yeah.
Those are her eyes.
Wow.
And like yours, they sparkle. And so she understood media, and she understood the power of media to tell a story. And so practicing medicine, which I did for quite a few years, doing heart transplants, inventing devices to fix heart valves, it was wonderful. But too often the patients I was dealing with couldn't prevent their problem. It was too late anymore. They were already in my operating room. Right. Lisa said, let's go out and make television shows that will explain to people why they can take advantage of their own bodies in good ways and take their lifestyle in a better direction. So we began making programs. I met Oprah, and the rest is history.
Wow. Well, look, I feel like you've certainly helped so many people. I know that when I used to see you coming on the Oprah show, I would stop what I was doing and tune in, because I always wanted to know what you had to say about things. I wanted to hear your advice on certain issues. Are you the person so my mom was an operating room nurse for many, many years, and she is the go-to person in our family. If anyone has a medical question, no matter what it is, they call my mom. Are you the person, like, within your friends and family? Are they still calling you? They asking you the questions, or how does that work?
This phone.
Yeah.
And especially over the holidays, I was triaging a little, mini ER of COVID issues.
Oh my gosh.
Once you're a doctor, as my parents would say, you can be a doctor on top of a mountain. As arid and desolate as it is, it's an opportunity for a doctor to prove themselves when they're surrounded by people who don't feel well. So it's always been an honor and a calling for me to practice medicine. And I'll do that for the rest of my life. I still have a medical license. I see patients. I haven't been able to operate of late because I've been preoccupied on the campaign trail. But I actually think to win this Senate campaign, I've got to channel what I do as a doctor, which is to look at you in the eyes, make sure you know that I care about you, that I'm here for you, and then tell you things you might not want to hear, that we need to all do together. Because the key for a physician is to make sure that you're respected. They might not love you, but they'll respect you, they'll do what you ask for, and they'll deliver on that. And people are stronger than they realize. And what I'm hearing over and over again is they're great ideas that can work if you stop suffocating them. Get out of the way of people, and they'll fix their lives for the better. And this applies to people who are trying to get their first job, retire in the right time, trying to build a new business. All these are opportunities that exist. And I think the pep talk that America is desiring is already in our hearts. It just needs to be kindled.
Yeah, it's so true. Just get out of our way and let us do what we've always done as Americans. I mean, you look at the history of this country, the incredible achievements within, the borders of the United States of America. It's just incredible. And we need more of that. I think there is more to come, but we have to let people start living their lives. That's one thing with COVID, not to get stuck on COVID, but I have you here, Dr. Oz, so I might as well ask you about it. It's not going away, right? We are looking at COVID basically being a part of our lives now. So we have to figure out the way forward and get back to living our lives, right? What kind of life is it if we all live in fear, shut away in our homes, without going to a job, without going to schools? That's pretty much where we stand at this point, right?
I think it's pretty clear that the COVID virus, in whatever new form it takes, is not going away. It's going to be an endemic virus. We've known that for more than a year. There's no such thing as vaccinating our way past this with the current generations of vaccines. We might make new vaccines that work better at prevention of spread, but the real action steps need to go back to the fundamentals of medicine, which is it's managing risk. If I'm locking your kids out of school, making them wear masks if they are in school, I'm hurting your children. How much am I hurting them? Well, we're getting data on that now. Cognitive decline among children born during COVID is dramatic. Children who are in school who are wearing masks don't learn to speak as well. If they're wearing glasses, which 5% of kids do, they fog up, they can't read. We don't make parents mask all day long. And especially if the kids are in a low risk category. And some of these clinical trials are showing us, like the German one, that there were no kids who died. in that 5 to 11-year-old last year. So healthy kids. And that's the other thing is it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Nursing homes need different strategies than kindergartens.
Right.
And if we don't realize that, there's something wrong with us, and we can't even ask the question. That's the bigger problem. So personally, I think mask mandates need to be pulled way back and only used when they're high-risk populations and high-risk times. And we are in a high-risk time right now, but the Omicron variant will pass because it's not as dangerous as prior ones, thankfully. We need to rethink completely some of the decisions around vaccinations. I don't think boosting young people makes any sense at all. That German data I mentioned earlier, if they have 0 deaths in boosted kids, in vaccinated kids, why do you boost? I just don't get it. I don't see how you can do any better than that. And these boosters aren't getting us more than a month or 2 of protection because they don't work well against the Omicron variant. And new variants are coming, and they're not going to work that well against them most likely either. So all these make you think as a physician, can we just get back to the fundamentals, which is your doctor tells you what they think you should get done based on who you are. Americans want 2 things from healthcare. They want transparency, and they want their own doctor. Tell me what's going on and how much it's going to cost. And let me have one person, one coach that I trust, I can ask questions of, that knows me and I know them.
It's been interesting, I think, to watch the folks in Congress who are doctors throughout this pandemic, because they have basically sort of said what you just said, which is it should be up to an individual and their doctor. And, this overarching mandating of everything is just, it's not doing anyone any good. And obviously at the beginning, nobody knew what to expect, and we were all happy to do what we thought was necessary to prevent people from dying, et cetera. But now we're 2 years in, and I just think, what you said there is basically along the lines of what anyone who is a doctor who represents a state or a congressional area all across the country, this is what they have been saying throughout the pandemic. So let's hope that we get there, although I don't know if Joe Biden tunes into any of this show, so we'll have to see. I know you talked about your father. Your father was a surgeon. Obviously, that kind of probably led you down a path. You said that you always were interested in that. Was there anything else, though, Dr. Oz, that you would have done, any other dream job, obviously other than being a United States senator?
The interesting thing about sports is it highlights the uniqueness of your body. And if you play sports and pay attention to how your body reacts to different activities, you begin to get fascinated by it. So part of the reason I became a physician was that my passion for understanding how anybody works, mine, yours, anybody else's. And that is a curiosity built upon a humanitarian desire to help each other that makes medicine a fantastic field. My youngest child, Oliver, just entered medical school at Columbia, and I never told him to become a doctor, but he felt the same passion that I just described without having me always, trying to push him into the field. And my father never pushed me to be a doctor either. I still think for anyone out there considering a healthcare field, nursing, respiratory technician, whatever you want to do, chiropractic, go out there and do it because it's fabulous careers that are fulfilling. If I wasn't a doctor, I probably would have tried to be a professional athlete. I loved it so much. It was so much fun to compete. I just enjoyed the mind games that you play, the ability to take the body to levels that you never thought possible. That was all wonderful. Obviously, it's not a full-time, full life career because you eventually age out. But I just respect the ability of athletes, and I love having athletes on my show whenever they're available because they can speak with deep honesty and integrity about what their life experience was like. And I think part of the reason we respect athletes is we look at them and think, they're able to do things, push themselves further than I could have. So what have they learned that allowed them to go there that I might be able to apply to my own life? And I'll give you a short example of this that I think everyone can resonate to. Before games, they play the national anthem. And I'd be sitting on the sidelines getting nervous, like everyone is, just want to go out in the field. Once the play starts, the game starts, you're fine.
Yeah.
And I'd wait for the last word of the national anthem, which was brave. And I kept thinking to myself, why is it home of the brave? It should be home of the free, right? We're about free people. And I thought it was the wrong word. Now, years later, I recognize it was the right word. What makes Americans special, what makes you able to do what you did, your father-in-law, the people that we respect in our lives, many of them are doing things that others could have done, but they did it bravely, and it allowed them to excel at a whole different level. And I think that's the bigger message that defines America. We are a brave people. Don't take away that national characteristic. I do not think we were brave during COVID. I think we allowed decisions to be made with the abundance of caution, which is not a practical way of living your life. And we allowed people to put up bars and walls to protect us, and it turned out they were cages. And that is why, as I run, I hear a chorus of people saying, you have done something to reawaken the need for me to be brave in my life. And that can be Now, I'm not talking about running headlong into a crowded room with virus. I'm talking about taking steps wisely to allow you to live your life without playing defense the entire time. And you should apply that not just to how you wisely manage COVID, but your job, your relationships. There's a paucity of people getting married, which I've always, again, I mentioned it's the smartest thing I ever did, best thing that happened to me was marrying my wife 36 years ago. It is an incredibly blissful moment to get up at 5 in the morning when you otherwise would be a little bit alone, and then you look next to you and the person you love is right there. You know, they're always with you. Now, in my house, the prosecution never rests. So I have other benefits because continuous criticism follows. But that's what we want people to do. And we know the realities of life are conservative, Lara, as Margaret Thatcher said. It's just the practicalities are of such that you need to manage your life and be thoughtful about these issues. If you get back to those basics and allow people to the power to control their destiny, this country will keep on the trajectory that your father-in-law put it on.
Well, gosh, wouldn't we like to get back there? And I love that you say that you would have been a professional athlete. In my dreams, Dr. Oz, that was the same for me. I mean, I still, do all kinds of crazy things like triathlons and all different sort of races. And I love it. I love the element of competition. I love trying to push myself, even though I'm 39, so I got a big birthday coming up in October, but being able to push my body to a limit, I think you're right. It is why we admire so much our athletes in America, and they really just, it's kind of who we are again as Americans, pushing yourselves. And I love that. Land of the free and home of the brave. You're right. We need to be brave. We need to push through this. We are the greatest country in the world. We can get through this. We can get back to some place of normalcy. And I want to say thank you for so many things, Dr. Oz. I mean, you've just been so influential, I think, in so many people's lives throughout the years. And it's really cool to see you now transitioning to politics. And I think you are going to really wake up a lot of people. If they haven't maybe been awake yet, they're going to start hearing from you and say, you know what, Dr. Oz is making a lot of sense. So good luck on everything. We'll certainly be watching. We'll certainly be following you. And thank you so much for your time. And thanks for being with us for a little bit today.
All right, God bless you. Good luck. And thanks for all you're doing.
You got it. Thank you. And to everybody at home, as always, thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View.